Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Our Years. This is Barry,
I'm Rima.
and today we're going to be talking about lessons learned before the age of 30.
Okay, not before, it's also up until.
Right.
Because Barry's going to turn 30 in a few days.
Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like it's wild that we're entering this new chapter.
I've been in it.
Yeah, Rima's okay. She put this upon herself today. I did not bring this up, so
It was only a matter of time.
yeah, I need Roshni to know that I didn't actually bring this up.
Roshni is my sister and she enjoys the little jokes that Barry makes.
Yeah, about Rima's age.
Yeah.
But yes, coming up on 30 in a couple of days. It's crazy that, it's funny to see that I'm going into my 30s and 30 to me was so different in my mind and what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I think I'm still a child.
Yeah, I can attest that.
But no, I think like there's just so much. And when I say that, it means just like I feel like there's still so much to experience in life. I don't know if I'm, at that age where people think 30 is, you have some sort of sense of like how your life is going to turn out in the next years to come.
Yeah.
And you kind of have it somewhat figured out. And I don't think that that's really the case.
Yeah. I know what you mean because when I was growing up too, I had this idea or notion of what being 30 meant and of an idea of what my life would be.
Yeah.
And it's nothing close to what that was.
Right.
And it's totally fine. But it's interesting how people think that 30 is like this milestone age when certain things have had to happen and they're so hard upon themselves, like personally or professionally, if certain things have not happened. And I don't know why that number makes such a difference, especially to women.
I think it's because, our frame of reference is probably just like our moms.
Yeah.
And those who are like before us, our generation before us. I think like our moms had us when they were like 30s,
Yeah.
like, and they had a family, they had a house, they had like all of this set up. And in our mind, I think a definition of, having life figured out is when you have those things, right?
Right.
And because we don't, it feels like we don't
Yeah.
have it figured out.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's true. I think we have some things figured out.
Yeah, for sure. I have way more things figured out now than I did in my 20s, obviously.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the topic of today's podcast. We want to talk about the 30 lessons that we learned by the time we turned 30.
Yeah, for sure. And because there's so many of them, should we just jump right into it?
Yeah. The first lesson that I want to talk about is done is better than perfect.
That's a good one. I feel like we've spent so much time trying to perfect something before actually completing it or feeling like we've completed it.
Yeah, when I was in my 20s, I put so much pressure on myself to do things to a certain standard that a lot of other aspects of my life took a hit. For instance, when I was writing the GMAT to go to grad school, I was so fixated on a perfect score, on a certain score, that it would have not done a substantial change to my profile for the admits, but I was so fixated on it and so many other aspects of my life took a hit. So now I'm learning that done is better than perfect. Even at work, maybe something is not done as well as I would have liked it to, but then I can always go back and reiterate it. But some things are just need to be pushed out, and that's an important lesson, I think.
I think the reason also I think this is important is because, I feel like, at least for me, you have less and less time in your life, right? And you want to be as productive as you can in the time that you do have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's important. Like, you can't be spending all this time trying to perfect something and then kind of like, as you said, let the other things in your life kind of slip.
Yeah.
You don't have that kind of luxury anymore.
Yeah, we'll never sleep then.
Yeah, that's true.
Another important lesson I learned is that consistency sometimes is more important than being an ace at something. For the longest time, I just had this notion that I wouldn't be good at certain things and I just never did it. But now I'm realizing the value of just being consistent at something. And it's okay if I'm not the best at it, but I still gain incremental, value from it. For instance, investing or lifting weights or even cooking for that instance.
Don't lie, you don't lift weights.
You don't know what I do in the gym. But yeah, I think consistency is more important than being a subject matter expert, for instance.
Yeah, I think you're pretty good at that though. With your book club, you're like pretty consistent with, setting up your monthly book club. I think what we've become pretty good at is like being consistent at going to play like pickleball, and then you can see the results, right? Like you get better because you're consistent.
Yeah.
And practice is key, and practice makes perfect.
Yeah. It's one of those things that are so obvious when someone says it to you, but then when you do it in life and you see how the changes you make, it just becomes so much more valuable.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The third, I guess, lesson that I wanted to point out is how valuable time is. I think when we were kids, right, like you just had all this time in the world. You can play all day if you wanted to. And I think like because you don't have that luxury anymore, as you get older, I think like time has become super valuable. And so to me, it's like how you spend that time is really important. Whether you're spending it with friends, who you're spending your time with in terms of friends, and how you're spending that time. Are you learning something new? Like going to like your point about, going back to your point about being consistent about like learning like a new hobby or something like that. I think it's the same thing. So yeah, just in general, I feel like time has become such a valuable asset, and I think that's actually more valuable than anything like money and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't get time back. If you want money, you can find ways to get more money back, right? But time is something that just goes by.
Yeah. There's a word, I think it's called Xenocide, and it describes how as you grow older, it feels like time is slipping away from you. Like when you were a kid, summer felt like forever, right? Summer vacation in my mind was just eons and eons, but now years are going by in the blink of an eye. Like Q1 is already over.
It's crazy. Like when we're going back to our point about how I feel like it's crazy that I'm already 30, because when I was a kid, it felt so far away.
Such a far off age.
Yeah. And now we're here.
We're
here. And because time is so valuable, right? I think one of the things I've had to learn in the past is you have all these different friends, right? But because you have limited time, you kind of have only that much time and energy to spend on certain people.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of limited myself to making time for friends who also make time for me. I think for the past few years, your friends kind of like slip away, right? And you kind of start filtering out who matters most to you, and you kind of put in time and effort into those people. But you also want to make sure that they do the same in return, because those are the people that you want to keep in life.
Yeah. And I think we've moved around so much that you also have to see how do you want to prioritize long distance friendships.
Right, exactly. Because you're pretty good at that. You spend a good chunk of your time keeping in touch with your friends overseas and like FaceTiming them.
I think I got lucky because I think they make more of an effort than me, and they like give me feedback when I'm not doing a good job, and I'm very glad that they do.
Yeah, but that's the whole point about like you're making time for friends who also make time for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the next lesson that I want to talk about is find an exercise that works for you and be consistent with it. Similar to what I said about consistency, but I feel like people think that they just don't like exercising, and they sort of dismiss exercise as this huge chunk. But there's so many kinds of exercises, and I think you need to take the time for yourself to do different kinds of activities. Maybe it's Pilates, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's weights. Just find an exercise that you enjoy and do it, because you will see the value of it as you grow older.
Yeah. And also the value of it is like it helps with anxiety and stress from work, right?
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of values to like finding a hobby and activity that you enjoy. I guess another lesson that I've learned in the couple of years is like getting out of your comfort zone. I think it's so easy to get trapped in being in your comfort zone and having everything like very easy to you.
Yeah.
But then that doesn't stimulate growth, right? And so I think like one of the lessons is just like maybe trying harder to put yourself out there and saying yes to different experiences and opportunities, right? I think that gives you a lot of different perspectives when you try things that aren't within your comfort zone. You get to put yourself in a place where you haven't experienced certain feelings or emotions before, and that stimulates like opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
And in general, I think like there's just so much to experience and see in the world, right? Like it's such a big place. Like there's so many different corners that you don't get to see and experience in different cultures, right?
Yeah.
And so being in your comfort zone kind of like puts you at a disadvantage in that you don't get to experience all the joys and good things in life that you don't know about.
Yeah.
So yeah, highly, yeah, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say that if you have the means, you should definitely try to live abroad for a certain time period of your life. If you don't have anything that's holding you to one place, you should definitely experience that, because you learn so much about yourself when you live abroad. And it doesn't have to be for a long period. Even if you can do it for just 3 months,
Right.
you learn so much about yourself in putting yourself in a new place and interacting with people from different experiences and cultures. So I highly recommend, if you can do that, you should.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that I've kind of told myself in the last few years is that I should try harder to say yes to a lot of like opportunities to go out and hang out with friends, or trying new activities,
Yeah.
or trying just like a new location, or just exploring a new neighborhood. I
Yeah.
think like that really helps, like you said, like helps you find out things about yourself that you didn't know about before. I guess you don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly.
And so putting yourself in a outside of your comfort zone allows you to learn about those things that you don't know.
Yeah.
And I guess like growing up, there's only so much that you know, right? It's like kind of based off of what your parents have given you, right? And now that you're an adult and that you're your own person, you have that luxury of like choosing things for yourself and going to do things for yourself. So you should definitely leverage and take advantage of that.
Yeah. You also learn perspectives, or you get to experience perspectives that you wouldn't have had, a different way of thinking, for instance. And then you can decide what you want to take away from it, right? But you just, like you said, you don't know what you don't know unless you put yourself in those situations, and you sort of owe it to yourself to go experience those things.
Yeah,
I know like some people are just very happy and complacent with their way of life, but I think there is value in getting out of your comfort zone. And it feels uncomfortable, and just because it feels awkward doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Yeah, for sure. Another lesson that, and I think that this has always been the case for me, or has always been like, I wouldn't say a motto that I live by, but just something that I try to always be mindful of, is always appreciating the little things. But I think added on to that is something that I haven't been good at in the past few years, but I've been trying to get better at, is to not sweat the little things that don't matter, right? I think a lot of the times I get so caught up with the little things when in the grand scheme of things they don't really mean much, or they don't really impact my life negatively.
Yeah.
Obviously, like that's not to say, don't care for like the details and the little things in life. I think the little things ultimately make up the big things. But when I say don't sweat the little things, it's mostly referring to like, if something bothers you like today, don't let it carry over to the next day, something that's maybe irritated you today can be solved in a matter of you controlling your emotions and being like, that's okay, just let it go.
Yeah.
And that will stop you from running your day with just something that really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I feel like this is one of those things that's really easy in theory, but when you actually have to live through it, it's really hard. But I think the more you do it, the better you get at it. It is a skill, I think.
It's a skill. And I think like you just got to be mindful of it, right? And once you are, like you said, it becomes a skill and a habit, and you live such a more bright, or you live such a happier life if you don't sweat the little things, right?
Just be smooth-brained.
That's all we need, just to be smooth brain. Speaking of smooth brains, the other day I saw the brain of a koala. The brain of a koala it doesn't have like the ridges and the
bumps
of like human brains. And that just goes to show how like undeveloped they are, but they live such happy lives just sitting on trees and eating their bamboo.
Yeah. I think they sleep like 22 hours.
Is it?
I think they sleep a lot.
Amazing. In my next life,
Koala or capybara?
Can we do both? Now, how about the koala first, and then the following life I'll do a capybara. But I think capybaras are actually pretty smart. They're very social animals. Everybody,
that doesn't make them smart.
EQ. They have really good emotional intelligence, evidently, because they can be friends with crocodiles without being eaten.
How much capybara content are you watching?
It's too good. You just gotta embrace yourself in capybara content.
Coming from the girl who says talking about the value of time.
But it's a balance.
It is a balance.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, another lesson I think I've learned is that unless someone has done something seriously egregious, don't judge people for how they were when they were teenagers, right? How they behaved or what they said, because you need to give people the grace to reinvent themselves. And they were really just children. So don't judge them based on what they were when they were teenagers. When I was in school, right, like people do stupid things in school, and my idea of certain classmates had remained the same. But then when I moved to the States and reconnected with a lot of them, I realized how incredible they were as people, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to reconnect. And if I went in with those preconceived notions, I wouldn't have made those friends that I did. So yeah, don't judge people on what they were when they were teenagers.
For sure.
And going on those similar lines, I think we also live in a society where it's almost looked down upon if you don't have an opinion on certain things, or if you change your mind, you're called wishy-washy. But I think it's okay to change your mind when you get new facts.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe a similar point is that, sometimes we are so caught up or like so fixated on what we think of someone or an opinion that we have on something.
Yeah.
That we often, when someone is talking to us or like telling us their opinion, we kind of like are so easily prone to forming our own opinions and like kind of deactivate when they're talking.
Yeah.
And so I think like active listening is a big one in order to kind of like receive more information and change your ideas about an opinion that you already had.
Yeah.
I think one of the lessons that we learned when we were at Cornell, I think in project management, is active listening, right? And I think one of the lessons that stuck with me there is when active listening doesn't mean like you're just like listening to them and, hearing what you're saying. It's actually like understanding or trying to understand where they're coming from the information that they're telling you. I think often in times when someone's talking to you, you're already like so quick to kind of form your opinion and judgment based on whatever is like coming out of their mouth.
Yeah.
And like trying to form your response to what they're saying, that you don't allow enough space to receive and process all the information that they're telling you. So I think like active listening is a big one where, you just take a moment, let them finish what they're saying before you form your own opinions.
Yeah. You meet so many people who are, when you're talking to them, they're not listening and they're just
Yes.
waiting to make their
yeah.
point. I think when I was younger, I put a lot of importance on just having an opinion,
Right.
because that almost showed that you were well read, right? Rather than now I value learning from people and their experiences.
Yeah, for sure. I think like one of the most valuable lessons I've learned is listening, the skill to listen. And then going back to my point, active listening, which is just not only listening, but really letting the person finish and processing all the information they've told you before you provide your own response. Another lesson I think I've learned is controlling what is within your control, right?
Yeah.
I think we get so caught up with trying to change everything,
Yeah.
but everything isn't always in our control. I think one of the things I'm guilty of in the past is like wanting to change my partner and wanting to have him do things that make me happy but doesn't make him happy, and I think like it's one of the biggest lessons in life is that you can't change other people. The only thing you can do is change yourself, because that is within your control, right? It's so hard to change other people when you're not them. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know what their motives are, right? Like
Yeah.
it's unfair also to do so because they have a different standard to you do.
Yeah. And you're also then holding them to a standard, first of all, that they didn't choose to be held against. And you're automatically setting them up for failure, right? You're measuring them against a standard that they didn't set on themselves.
Right.
So they're obviously going to fail.
Right.
And then everyone's just going to be disappointed.
Yeah. So I think like exactly. So one of the biggest things I've learned is, just controlling what you can control. And that also includes like emotions, right?
Yeah.
How your day plays out is actually, I think, up to you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right? Like when you wake up, how your mood or the mood you set for yourself for the day is really dependent on you. If you tell yourself you're going to have a happy day, you tell yourself that you can move on from bad emotions in the morning, you can do that.
Yeah.
Right? And you can choose the way you live based on controlling the things you can control.
I agree. You can't control all the things that happen to you, but you can control how you react to them.
Right.
And that makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, for sure. I think this next lesson, well, isn't really like something that I've learned, but more so like something I continue to be mindful of, is just always be kind to others and give them benefit of the doubt. I think maybe the latter is something that I've learned to do a lot more. I think growing up, my parents have always taught me to be kind to others. So I think that's been instilled in me, but like giving people benefit of the doubt is something that I continue to work on, right? I think it's very easy when you're up in your emotions, you know, and you're kind of irritated or annoyed by something, and you kind of want to just blame others, right? But maybe from their perspective, they didn't intend to do something that would annoy you or irritate you. So I think just giving people benefit of the doubt and understanding from their perspective before you choose to blame or be angry at them.
Yeah, that's a valuable one. Even especially at work, I think that's an important value to have.
Yeah.
To believe that people are working to the best of their abilities and to not judge them with preconceived notions.
Yeah. In addition to work, also just like in your personal life, right? I think, especially in relationships, like the ones that are, I think, most successful in terms of like couples that are happy are people that give each other benefit of the doubt, you know, just always feeling like your partner has the best interest and the best intentions.
Yeah.
And when something doesn't go well, just reminding yourself that they're not out to get you, right? They're not trying to see you fail. Like, just understanding that whatever they did that made you angry or annoyed didn't come from a bad place and wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
So, yeah, giving them benefit of the doubt. And I think that applies to your friends as well. I think now that I am going into my 30s, and as we were saying earlier about how, you know, 30s in our mind was a certain way, I think I had to kind of remind myself that everybody works on a different timeline. You know, it's very easy to get caught up and be like, oh, all my friends are getting married, all my friends are having kids, all my friends are managers in their respective careers. And it's easy to compare yourself and be like, why am I not in those stages, right? And that's why I think like it's really important to be mindful that at the end of the day, you know, everybody's got their own journey. Success to them right now may be success for you later in life, and at the end of the day, you're both successful, right? It just, everybody's timing is different. It happens at different circumstances, situations, you know, and just places in life.
Yeah. I think I also had this notion that a career projection should be linear. And if it's not linear, you know, and that could be like getting a certain compensation or like say managing people. And if it is not linear, then you're a failure. And I think I had to unlearn that notion.
Yeah. And I think just going off of timeline, I think another thing to be really mindful of is like being patient. You know, I think good things take time. Don't rush into something thinking that with the snap of your fingers it's going to become exactly how you want it to be. I think, you know, patience is also a skill that I've had to learn throughout the years. I think naturally I'm quite a someone who likes productivity and like likes to move forward with things very quickly. But you know, all the good things in life kind of just take time. It needs to cook.
Is that a thing?
It's how the kids say it these days.
Which kids are saying this?
Look it up. Aren't you on Reddit?
Nobody's saying this. Speaking of skills, I think another lesson that I've learned is that compartmentalizing is also a skill. When I was in my 20s, if I was doing one thing, all the other aspects of my life took a hit. For instance, if I was trying to apply to a different job, then, you know, I didn't make as much time for my friends and family. And I almost to the point of neglecting them, right? And I used to just be like, this is who I am. But since then, I've learned that compartmentalizing is a skill and that you should be able to set boundaries for certain things in your life, both personal and professional. And you can't let certain aspects seep into the rest of your life, because you're just going to harm all those other aspects, right? And you can't be like, okay, once I achieve this goal, everything is going to go back to normal, because those goalposts keep changing, and you're going to have new goals, whether it's personal or professional. So people around you just can't wait until you finished all your goals and then go back to prioritizing them, right? That's not going to happen. So you just need to find a way to set better boundaries and prioritize things in a fair manner.
I think that's also a skill that I've also had to learn in the past few years, especially like I think your point about, when you're like so focused on doing one thing, you kind of forget that you need to do others.
Yeah.
I think an example that I can think of is like back in the day when I was doing exams like right after the other, like it was just like 2 weeks of just exams back to back. And then you kind of like take a toll on your body and your health because you're so stressed.
Yeah.
And then what I had to learn to do is like, I'm going to set an hour to 2 hours just to take a break, go out, take a stroll, go exercise.
Yeah.
And just not think about work.
Yeah.
And then you come back actually more productive because you're refreshed and you've taken time away from the work that you've been doing.
Yeah. One of my friends told me that if you don't have time to work out for 20 minutes in a day, then you need to work out for 40 minutes.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep sight of what is important to you, but also not neglect the other aspects of your life, because it really also takes a toll on your mental health.
Yeah,
and I don't think that's talked about enough.
Yeah. No, I think like it's because of Western environments, that kind of emphasizes the need for balance.
Yeah.
And I think that's because having been exposed to that, I think that's really helped me learn the skill of compartmentalizing. Recently, I've actually watched a Netflix series.
Okay.
It's called Sweet Magnolias.
Okay.
And it's just one of like those wholesome Netflix shows. But I think one of the women, I think, was going through kind of friendship ups and downs with her friends. So the Sweet Magnolias, essentially, having context, is like 3 women that are best friends for the longest time. And they create this community and trying to get people together. And one of the women in this group is just so fixated on like trying to help others. And I think that kind of helped me do like a reflection on myself and how sometimes, when people come to you looking for like a listening ear or just to listen to their like woes and what they're going through or what they're stressed about, they're not always looking for advice. I think I get so caught up on wanting to help them and provide my assistance that I just like always try to offer what I can do to help, but sometimes people don't need that. And I think one of the lessons I've learned is that, you can be there just to listen to them, and then at the end of it, offer if there's anything you can do. And if there isn't, don't try to force that upon them. Don't try to force your help, because at the end of the day, what will be helpful to them is determined by them and not you. And that's something that I've had to learn.
One of my managers once told me that if someone is describing their problem to me, to ask them if they're in feeling stage or solution stage. I remember
we spoke about this before.
Yeah, and if someone is in feeling stage, then they just need a ear. They just need to vent or a shoulder to cry on, and you don't need to offer them any advice. You just need to be there, give them a hug, and that's it. And then if someone's in an execution phase, then it makes sense for you to offer advice or offer help, right? But sometimes, it helps to know which phase that people are in, and I really like that advice.
Yeah, I think that is good advice. I think like including ourselves, right? Sometimes we just need a little bit of a rant. We don't expect the person that's listening to give us advice.
I'll solve the problem.
And sometimes you already know the solution. You just want a listening ear, you just want someone to be present and kind of hear you out. And I think, knowing that, I should apply that to the opposite side as well.
Another lesson I think I've learned is to know what my signs of burnout are and then do something about it. I didn't understand what burnout was when I was in my 20s. I just thought that it's just when you're really stressed at work, but I didn't realize the effects that it has on your body, both physically and mentally. And I've also realized that people feel burnout in different ways, right? Some people sort of isolate themselves, they're not as social. Some people don't sleep very well. Some people neglect, say, getting exercise. So it's different for different people. A lesson that I've learned for myself is to know what my signs are and know when I have to do something about it versus when it's just a day that's bad, right? And I'm not going to feel like that the next day versus something that's going to be semi-permanent. And unless I do something or intervene, it's not going to change.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think like that's also something I've had to learn, especially I think I've only like learned it in my late 20s what like burnout is. I think I never felt it before because to me it's just like, oh, I was just stressed.
Right.
I'll get over it.
Yeah.
Like it's just one of those things where, oh, you're just stressed out. It's just a phase because you have so much on you. And it's okay. It'll just pass.
Yeah.
You know, that's my thought before I kind of like learned what burnout is and that I needed to do something about burnout in order to get my mind back on track and to be more productive.
What are your signs when you're like, okay, you get alerted that I'm not doing well and I need to do something about it? What are your signs of burnout?
I think it's interesting you asked for signs because obviously before I didn't know that there were signs, right? Or there were symptoms and I had to look it up. And I think one of the ones that I've observed for myself is being less productive. I tend to procrastinate when I have a lot of things that I need to do. So I know I have like 100 things on my to-do list, but I will still sit and not do anything or try to like put it off. And that's when I feel like, you know, this is burnout. I think my earliest sign or my earliest realization was when I was going through a phase of my project where I was just doing so much work and so much stuff that I decided, you know, I just needed time away. And so I took the day off to do very mundane things like doing my groceries or just going for a walk. And that's when I realized that I was in so much burnout that I really like enjoyed the little mundane things so much because it kind of just allowed me to not use my brain and just to take time away.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference and I'm glad that you got the chance to do that.
Yeah, so I guess like what are some of the things that you do to help with burnout that you experience?
Well, one thing is that I tell the people around me that I am experiencing burnout, whether it's my friends or my coworkers, because with friends it helps because I also do this thing where I tend to isolate myself socially. So then they almost force me to come out and like do things, you know, whether it's as simple as going for a walk or like just spending time in a park, for instance, right? So they force me to do that and they get me out of my, out of this like
bubble.
Out of my bubble. And at work it helps because then the person that I'm working with or the people that I'm working with know why I'm behaving a certain way. So they know that if I look off in a meeting, it's not anything that they've done. It's just something that I'm going through. And then I'm also not worried about how I'm being perceived at work. So that helps. Another thing that helps is eating better. I think for me, the first sign of knowing that I'm burnt out is that I stop eating well or eating at all. And that's when I know that I'm burnt out. So what that does, so then I sort of force myself to eat better. Someone once told me that when you eat, you're not just feeding your body, you're also feeding your mind. And it's such an obvious correlation that when you're not eating well, you feel more tired and you feel more anxious and stressed. So eating well helps. Another thing that helps is sleeping. But it's difficult to do that when you are burnt out, right? Because you're constantly thinking about other ways to be productive. So it's sort of counterintuitive. But I think then working out helps a lot because you're almost like tiring your body and the only thing you have to do is sleep. So that helps.
Yeah. I think for sure, knowing kind of like you said, right, everybody is different and the way they react to burnout is different, and how to get themselves back on track. And I think it's good that you spend the time to like observe what works or doesn't work for you. Another lesson I've learned, and I think this is so intuitive and like people talk about it so much, but it's not to overthink or overread the actions or the actions that people do or the things that people say, right? I think I get so caught up because I'm pretty sensitive to what people say and do, and so I get so caught up in like trying to analyze or like overthink what the meaning of what they did or say was. But sometimes people just, you know, don't think so much and they just say whatever or do whatever, you know, and like that sends me on like a spiral, which is not good for my mental health. So I think like just that lesson is just teaching me to, you know, sometimes you do need to be sensitive, you know, and I think it's just kind of making sure that I ration it accurately or correctly. I think I tend to do 100% of overthinking, whereas, you know, sometimes you only just need
Do a
60%.
10%. I love that. Yeah.
You know, like
Time box it.
yeah, exactly. And I think I'm still learning to do that, like what is okay and what's not okay. Obviously, when someone makes a joke, you know, you don't overthink it. But what I'm saying is more so like when people make a comment about you personally that is maybe has a more negative connotation, you don't have to overthink it. Sometimes they can think whatever they want to think, but that's not a reflection of who you actually are.
That's true.
Yeah.
Another lesson in the similar vein of how you react is that if you want something, you need to ask for it, and people can't read your mind.
Right, that's a huge one. I think as children or when we were younger, right, we always had this notion of, oh, if they get me, they'll know.
Oh my God, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we're
And
both
if they
guilty
don't
of
get it, they are the bad people. I'm not going to do anything to make their life or my life easier.
Setting up them for failure.
Yeah, setting them up for failure. And I think even at like when we were doing, for instance, salary negotiations, right? I think we spoke about this, that unless you ask for something, you're not going to get it. And that was a valuable lesson.
Yeah.
And also in your personal life, if someone is not responding to you in a way that you want them to, you need to tell them. You can't just label them a bad friend because they're not doing something that
Right.
you're expecting them to.
And it's also not like going back to my point about, you know, giving them the benefit of the doubt. They don't have bad intentions, right? They just simply don't know. So, you know, them not doing something that you want them to do because you didn't tell them doesn't mean that they don't want to do it. It's simply they don't know.
Yeah. I used to think that a good communicator was just someone who was eloquent and spoke well. But a good communicator is someone who also helps the other person understand
Right.
how they need to be perceived, right?
Yes, for
So,
sure.
yeah.
It's communication is two ways. So.
Yeah.
So another lesson I think especially in the past few years that I've learned is I've been collecting all these friends
Like Pokemon.
No, I'm kidding. But I think I am someone who takes friendship very sensitively, and I don't take it lightly, right? And so I've always had this notion of, you know, I need to spend all my time on my friends, you know, and if they're my friend or if they've come into my life, you know, I need to continue
To keep them there?
Yes, keep them there, or like valuing them. And as true as that is, I think you should be selective of your friends, right? Like people who don't choose to also value you as a friend, it's okay to let them go. I think I've recently learned this, that it is okay to remove certain people from your life when they no longer bring positive impact or value into your life.
Yeah.
And as hard as that is, you know, sometimes like people get tied up with, oh, but I've been with this friend for like, I've known them for like 5 years plus, you know, like we just have so much history. But what value is that adding to your life if you continue to have them there, right? Like if they've become this person that maybe brings more negativity into your life than positive vibes, then why keep them there? And I think that I've had to learn that it's okay to remove some people, you know. Sure, you can talk about it and see if things change, but if it doesn't, then we move on.
Yeah. Friendship breakups are tough.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people don't like going through it, because it is hard. But
no, everybody likes friendship breakups.
Yeah, what do you mean? I didn't get that memo. But I think, you know, you outgrow some people and some friends will outgrow you, and it's okay to let them go.
Yeah.
And not every friendship is going to be a permanent one.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And even if they have been what you thought was permanent in the last few years, it doesn't mean that going forward they will always be there.
Yeah.
Some people, you know, prioritize or value different things in life, and that changes as you go through life, right? So once your goals in life are different, you know, you have less things in common, and when both people aren't on the same page anymore, it's just time to move on.
Yeah.
As we were talking about like removing people or like moving on from friends that don't add value to your life, I think on the opposite end of that is choosing your friends wisely, because and I heard this recently is like, and I think it makes total sense. It's just I never put it into words, but your friends are actually a reflection of who you are. They are a representation of you, right? When you go out or, you know, you meet your potential partner, when you meet their friends, right, you kind of get a better idea of who they are as a person. And the same goes for you. So I think it's really important to select your friends, and you want your friends to be a pretty accurate representation of who you are.
Yeah. Do you think that's like an automatic filtering that happens, or do you think you need to put in an effort for it? And the reason I ask is because as you grow older, you have also lesser time to give to people, right?
Yes.
Including friendships.
Right.
So you're also prioritizing people that have the same values or hobbies or interests as you, right? So do you think that'll happen automatically?
I think it's a combination of both. You know, I think the automatic filtration is true to an extent in that, you know, when you go and play pickleball, for example, you know, because people there are like-minded and they enjoy the same things as you kind of have them around, right? I think I agree with that, but at the same time, right, if you want certain people with a certain mindset in your life, you also have to put in work. Another point I wanted to make on that front is going back to how valuable time is, you know, and being selective of your friends, and your friends representing who you are, right? I think if you are a person that wants to grow, right, you want to be surrounded by people who also wants to grow.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that I think my brother told me when I was pretty young was that, you know, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You always want to be like, if you're in a room full of people that are not as smart as you are or don't talk about the same things that you do, then you're in the wrong room. If that's what you're looking for, then you should surround yourself with people
Wow.
like that. Yeah, I think one of the quotes that he said was like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
I love that.
And I love it. And I think that's stuck with me for the longest time. And I think it's so true. If you're someone who likes growth and wants to improve yourself in any aspect of life, right? It doesn't have to be career only. It can also just be like your outlook on life, or trying to get better at pickleball, for example,
Yeah.
right? Like just put yourself in a room where others are better than you.
Yeah.
And that's how you improve.
I like that. I can't believe Eric came up with that insight.
I know, crazy.
Segueing from that very insightful lesson is my lesson, which is to drink more water.
That's it?
Yeah. It's self-explanatory. I feel like people don't realize how important this is. I feel like I was permanently dehydrated in my 20s and I didn't even realize I was dehydrated.
I think you continue to be dehydrated. I often have to tell this girl that she has to drink more water. And you know what she says to me? I don't want to pee in the middle of the night. She's like, I'm not going to drink water because I don't want to get up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom.
Yeah, dude.
And that's why
I'm
you're
like
dehydrated.
Yeah, but like, if you think this is lesser, imagine what I was in my 20s.
This makes sense that this is one of the items that she listed.
Yeah, when I was telling Barry about what I want to talk about and I brought this up, she thought I was joking. But no, drink more water, guys.
Life lessons. Life lessons from Rima.
Yeah.
The next one isn't really like a lesson that I've learned in the past few years. It's kind of just always stuck with me. And I like to keep it on the list because I hope it continues to stick with me, is being authentic and being true to yourself. I think integrity is a huge one for me personally, and it's so easy to be influenced by your peers and those around you to change those values and morals. And sometimes, you know, doing things right and doing things in a good way may not be what those around you want to see or hear, but if it's the right thing to do, you know, I think at the end of the day, doing the right thing is the most important thing.
Yeah. You know, if I had to describe you to someone who didn't know you, I think having high integrity would be up there in how I describe you. And I think that's very core to who you are. I think you really try hard to do the right thing all the time, and not many people do that. And it's not an easy thing to do, but you do a really good job of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's so nice. And I appreciate that because I think I pride myself on that. I think I would like to see myself through in this lifetime to be someone who has high integrity. I think for me, like, doing the right thing doesn't always mean that I have to change people to also do the right thing. But as long as I am doing the right thing, I think that's what's most important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not having people like change that, because I think it's so easy for people, like if you're going out in a group, you know, and people are like, let's go do something scandalous, let's go do something illegal.
Which group are you in where people are like, let's go do something illegal?
Well, like maybe it can be something silly, like something
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
that is harmless in what they think it is. But if it's at the end of the day not the right thing to do, I think I would step out.
Yeah, I know you would.
Yep.
Another important lesson I think I've learned is to not fall for the sunk cost fallacy. By, for instance, continuing a project, even though there's no value in it, just because you've invested too much time or resources into it, like money.
Yeah.
I think that's an important lesson. For the longest time, I used to think if you stop doing a project, then you're a quitter, and who wants to be that? But I've realized that no, you shouldn't continue doing something that doesn't have value. I used to. It can be something as simple as like continuing to read a book that I don't like. I would never stop reading a book.
Wow.
Because even if I didn't like it, I would think that I had to finish it, because otherwise that would just make me a quitter. And I don't know why I had this notion, but that was an important lesson. Now, if I don't like a book, I just stop reading it.
Yeah, for sure, because time is valuable.
Exactly.
Like, why would you continue doing something that doesn't bring you joy
Yeah.
and value?
Yeah, I don't know. There was just so much importance that I placed on finishing a project, even though it didn't make me happy. And that's something that I had to learn.
Yeah, for sure. I think sunk cost fallacy has like gone to most people, right? I don't think anyone in this lifetime has not experienced that.
Yeah.
It's so easy to, because investing time and emotions into something, it's real, right? Like, it's so hard to like let that go just with the snap of the fingers.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people stay also in relationships that has stopped giving them happiness because they've invested so much time.
I think
into
that's
it.
the most common, actually. Not even just relationships, also friendships, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, oh, but I've known them for so long.
Exactly.
Or I've been together with them for so long.
Yeah, we have all the shared history, but
Yeah.
you need to know when need
it's
to.
time to go.
Yeah.
Time to bounce.
Yeah. Exactly.
This next one, I think, is something that I have felt on the other end. So I think I've experienced where people judge me based on opinions that others had of me, which were maybe false.
Interesting.
And then they kind of made judgments about me before they even got the chance to meet me or understand me. And so having experienced that, I don't want to have other people experience that, because I know what it feels like firsthand.
Yeah.
So I think one of the lessons is to not judge someone by just opinions that other people tell you of them.
Yeah.
It's really important to just, if you want to, I think it's important to double check or fact check opinions, right?
Yeah.
If someone tells you, this person is A, B, and C, like they're not a nice person or whatnot, how do you know? You're not the person that experienced. Maybe one bad experience they had caused them to have that conclusion.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean that you'll experience the same thing with this person, right? But maybe to begin with, right, that person wasn't even what person A was saying. Or they're not even like what person A was saying, right? And it's up to you to go and make or form that judgment yourself.
Yeah. I've also been guilty of judging people through secondhand anecdotes.
Right.
So yeah,
right.
that's a good lesson.
Yeah.
The next lesson is to be open to the process of therapy instead of resisting it. When I was in my late 20s, my mental health was terrible. And it was one of those things that I just thought would become better, or I had all the resources, within myself to be better. And I kept fighting going to therapy because I was just like, oh, I'm not one of those people that need therapy, I got this, but I didn't get it. And I think because of like advice that I got from other friends and family, I did end up going to therapy. And I also learned that there's different kinds of therapy. I just had this notion of therapy where I just lie on someone's couch and just tell them my feelings. That's not what therapy is at all. I found a cognitive behavior therapist, and what she helped me do was identify trends on why my mental health was the state that it was in, and offer solutions, but in a way that was very almost not overwhelming. It was just like a conversation that we were having. It was like talking to a friend, a non-judgmental friend. And honestly, nothing that I learned in therapy was like earth-shattering. I think it's just the frequency at which I was listening to the advice and the suggestions that helped.
Right.
And it was also like a non-judgmental space. I could voice my opinions and thoughts without fear of judgment. I think it was so valuable that I did that. Even simple things like eating better, getting more exercise. Like I said, it's not earth-shattering, but I needed someone to tell me that. And that's why therapy helped. And I wish that I could have done it sooner, right? And I don't know why I resisted it so much. And it's not something you have to do constantly. Once you take what you can from it, it's okay to stop. But I think my advice and a lesson that I learned was that don't fight therapy.
Okay. So I think in the last few years, this one has been especially relevant, is rejection. I think rejection is often perceived as you're not good enough. But I think on the flip side, right, and a lesson that I've had to learn is that rejection is just redirection. And I guess what that means is that you just need to remind yourself that being rejected from something doesn't mean that you're not good enough, but instead it's not the right fit for you. And it's actually a blessing in disguise, because at the end of the day, that helps you kind of redirect yourself and set you on the path that is most suitable and compatible for you. Yeah, and I think like that's in all like aspects of life, right? Like with friendships, with relationships, with jobs. I think I got so much rejection when I was looking for jobs that I almost felt like I was a failure. And it's easy to think that, right? Especially when
hard.
Especially when I'm like shooting out 150 job applications and I get rejected to 90% of it. Like, it's hard not to feel like you are not good enough. But once I like started doing my research on why that is and try to understand like why I am getting rejected, it wasn't actually that I'm not good enough, but because the strategy I was taking wasn't the right strategy.
Yeah.
And then once I realized that and I redirected myself and reestablished the strategy that I would take, I was getting all these interviews and offers.
Yeah. I think with rejection, it's hard because you have this idea of what the future should be.
Right.
And you're so hung up on that idea that any change to it sort of like just disarms you. And it's the easiest thing to do is take it personally, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that is out of my list the biggest one that I've had to learn. And I think it's important just to keep reminding yourself that.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah. Tell them what your next one is.
My next lesson is don't cut your own bangs.
Among the 30 lessons that we've learned.
Yeah. And a very important one.
Very, very
is
critical
don't
one.
cut your own bangs. You think, oh, I'll save $15, so I'll just like cut my own bangs. It's not going to look good.
Should we insert a photo?
No,
I think
we should. Oh my God. Yeah. Pay that $15 so you don't look like a prepubescent Asian boy.
Once we get 1,000 subscribers, then we can show a photo of Rima's bangs.
So
that she
bad.
cut for herself.
So bad. And I do it multiple times. I just forget that I'm bad at cutting bangs.
I'll cut your bangs for you.
No. That's no. Another lesson is don't let your friends cut your bangs unless they're professionals.
I am.
Okay.
I used to cut my own bangs.
That's not a professional.
I used to look cute.
No. Yeah. So don't cut your own bangs.
Life lessons. Right. The next one I think like a lot of people talk about, but I don't think people apply it enough to their lives, is the way you view a glass that is half full or half empty. I'm sure everybody's heard of that analogy, right? And I think it's so important to view your glass half full. I think with a mindset of half empty, you'll always be in a negative perspective, right? And I think it makes a world of a difference when your outlook on life is positive. I think you invite a lot more opportunities because you're focused on the opportunities. Whereas if your outlook is more negative, you're kind of just so focused on, why is this happening to me? Why is it not going the way I want it to? And you're so kind of like trapped in that little bubble of like why things aren't working out, so that you're kind of missing the opportunities of all the things that could be working out.
Right. Yeah, you're not seeing what could be possible because you're sort of in the spiral of things are not working out.
Right.
Yeah. And it's hard to get yourself out of that spiral, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like this is one that I added to my list. Not a lesson that I've learned. It's kind of like, I think I've always been pretty positive and kind of had this like positive attitude, but I think in the chaos of life and all the things that happen to you, obviously like life is like waves, right? Like you get ups and downs. I think this is especially important to remind yourself of when you're going through like the more lower phases in life. At the end of the day, you'll come back up and things will be great. But in order to come back up, you need to have that positive mindset and outlook in order to invite those opportunities, right?
Yeah. And I think this goes back to what you said about surrounding yourself by people to create the life that you want to create.
Right.
I think if sometimes you don't have the ability or the strength or just the fortitude to do this for yourself, having people around you who can
100%.
help you remember or inspire you helps a lot.
Yeah. And I think I've experienced that firsthand, and I'm very grateful and very privileged and lucky, is that in the high school or the earlier years of my life, I've had the joy of being surrounded by people who are super positive. And like you said, when I was going through like a maybe lower phase, those were the people that I surround myself with. And so I was able to more easily pull myself out of that negative phase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next very important lesson that I learned in my 20s is that my parents are just people and that they don't have all the answers. And if they're not able to give me the best advice, it's just because they don't know.
Yeah.
And it's unfair for me to hold them up to a standard that they can't meet.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like I said, they're just people.
Yeah.
And you need to not judge them as harshly.
It's so funny. Rima and I were doing a draft of this list, and she initially removed this from her list.
Yeah.
Why? Why did you initially remove it?
Because I think it's just, I don't know if it's a lesson learned or it's just one of those facts of life that you realize when you grow up.
It's good to have on this list, kind of just to remind yourself, though, that that's, at the end of the day, like, your parents are just humans. I think I had the same point, right? I think we need to be kinder to our parents, because there are first-time parents too.
Yeah.
They haven't had this like SOP or like booklets handed to them on how to be good parents.
Yeah.
Parents make mistakes. They say things that hurt you, but like you said, at the end of the day, they're just humans like us, and humans make mistakes.
Yeah.
We just got to be kinder to them. And I think that's especially true now that we're getting older. That also means that our parents are getting older. The time that you have with them are limited going forward. And so it's just so important to just be kinder to them and spend more time with them. And so that's why I included it on my list.
Yeah. We also live so far away from our parents that the time that we do have with them, even physically, is so valuable.
Yeah. So definitely make time for them, even if it's just a call once a week, just to say how you're doing, see how they are. I think that really, it makes a difference to them. Yeah. Especially because they have less things going on in their lives now, right? I think they just want to see that their kids are doing well.
Okay, next lesson that I learned in my 20s, that breakup will not break you.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think we get so trapped or caught up in the moment that we feel like our world is breaking apart because you've had all this time and energy spent on this person.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Again, yes, sunk cost fallacy. That we think that it's like the end of the world. Yeah. But it's really not.
Yeah, it's not. And I hate that the cliche time heals is true.
It is true. I agree. I think like I agree half with it. I think that time does heal, but I think at the end of the day, looking for closure is you putting closure on it and you telling yourself that this is a part of my life and it's a chapter that I need to close. And then once you do that for yourself, then you can move on. But obviously, I think that takes time in order for you to be like, okay, it's time to close this chapter.
Yeah.
Second to last one. I think this one has been one that I continue to try to teach myself, is to not place my own standards on other people. I think it's so easy because everybody's got different standards, right? And you have your own way of doing things, and because you live in your own world and because you're the main character of your world, you feel like the people that come into your world should also meet the same standards.
Yeah.
But that's so unfair because everybody's got their own standards. They're probably also like, why are you not meeting my standards?
Yeah.
And so I think like this is one thing that I've kind of had to learn, especially with like people that are closest to me, just because, they're not focused on getting to a certain place in their career. It doesn't mean, they're not up to standards. They're not doing well in life.
Yeah.
And I know that it comes from a place of you wanting to see them do well.
Yeah.
But you expecting them to do something that is not high up as a goal in their life.
Yeah.
It's just purely unfair.
Yeah. You're setting them up for failure.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think that's one of the things I had to learn.
Yeah, I saw a stand-up comedy show the other day, and the comic was basically like, when at the beginning of a relationship, when you meet someone, it's like, your friend meets someone, they come back and they tell you, oh my God, I spent hours talking to this person. I don't know where the time when it was so magical, like this person is so interesting. And then you're like gaga over this person at the beginning of the relationship. And then he talked about how, like, somewhere in the middle, the same friends were coming back to him and saying, like, this person wears shoes inside the house. It's like all the magic is gone because this person wears shoes inside the house.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. It's like, in the grand scheme of things and the big picture, those standards don't really, obviously use it as a baseline,
Obviously.
right? So you need some sort of filtering for the people that you want in your life.
Yeah.
But holding them to no shoes in the house and filtering them out that way, I don't know if that's a good way of filtering people. Coming up on our last lesson, I think this is one that is super relevant to me at the moment, is setting boundaries. I think one specific sentence that I've heard someone say is, you get what you allow. And I think that is so important, especially now that I am in my 30s. I think setting those boundaries and allowing the right people, the right things in life to come into your life is something that you should be very cautious of, because of the limited time and energy that you have for yourself. You only want to invite those that will add value.
Yeah. And it's also boundary setting, right? It's what you're willing to put into other people and into the world. So I think it's a two-way street. But yeah, I think setting boundaries was something that is a very valuable lesson that I learned.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like, when someone says, you get what you allow, is basically saying, boundary setting. If you allow this person to treat you with disrespect, then that is what you will get.
Exactly.
If you don't want to be disrespected, then don't allow it.
Right.
And I think that's such an important lesson. And I think it's easier said than done, because, if you like this person to a certain extent, and it's so easy just to kind of like oversee some of the small things. But I think at the end of the day, you should set those boundaries, because when you get deeper into the friendship or the relationship, those are the things that will, if it matters to you from the very beginning, it'll ultimately matter to you. Even now, if you see them in rose tinted glasses, it will come out at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that wraps it up.
Yeah.
Tell us what you guys think.
Yeah. Tell us what are the lessons that you learned in your 20s and early 30s that are super valuable. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see. So leave your comments down below, or hit us up on Instagram or YouTube. Leave us comments. We'll be very interested to see what you guys think.
See you next week.
See ya.